The house is, I think of it as kind of like a sanctuary. You come in, it's nice and quiet. The lighting is somber. The seasonal change is pretty amazing. Watching the woods dissolve basically through. It's a house for all seasons. It changes throughout the year, and it's just so nice experiencing it. Sun coming in, during the winter, touching the fireplace, that's 12 feet in the house. It's pretty amazing. My name is Tim Hills. We are in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and this is our house. It's originally called the Judy House for the Judy family. Designed by Norman Carver. He was a local architect. He was born here. He went to Yale. He traveled a lot in Japan, and then he came back and started his practice, and he did a lot of Japanese-influenced architecture. This home was finished in 1973 for a family called the Judys, and he was heavily influenced by Frank Lloyd Wright first, and then Japanese traditional architecture. The family that it was designed for is quite interesting. We bought it from the son of the original owner, so he actually grew up in the house. And he told us that his father worked for Upjohn Pharmaceuticals. He was a biochemist, and he was one of many Upjohn clients that Norm Carver had. Kalamazoo is a relatively small community, so once an architect got known and he was recommended, people went to see the house, and he became very popular. He did a lot, I would say, vast majority of the modern architecture in Kalamazoo. Norman Carver was Kalamazoo born. He loved architecture and photography from an early age. He did a couple of years of college and then decided to join the military for the GI Bill. So that would enable him to go on to Yale Architecture School. He had no idea where he was going to be sent, and he went straight to Kyoto, Japan. And that was, he said, life-changing for him. A huge amount of traditional architecture still remained there, and it just had a massive effect on his aesthetics and appreciation for the Japanese culture. And so he traveled around Japan quite a lot, photographing. Then he went back to America, and he went to Yale Architecture School. That's where he met his wife, who was also studying in the architecture school. And he actually quit architecture school. He never graduated, but his wife stayed on, finished her degree, and as soon as she finished, they went to Japan on a Fulbright scholarship that he got for architectural photography. And then they came back. He interviewed with a couple of big practices, Minoru Yamasaki and Iro Saarinen, and he weighed up the benefits of joining either one. And at the time, he was more drawn to Yamasaki's work. Both of them were in Detroit area at that time. So he worked there for, I think, 2 years before deciding to move to Kalamazoo briefly. And while he was in Kalamazoo, he met an old school friend who was at Upjohn. And he said, design me a little cottage on the lake. And then this one little cottage became a massive mansion of sorts. He had always intended to leave and move to the West Coast because he loved that kind of architecture. But the jobs kept on coming, and he established his practice here, and it sort of self-perpetuated. Having talked to the original owner's son, Stephen Judy, he gave the impression that his parents were very conscious of cost. And so looking at the design, it makes a lot of sense that it's a square. It's 2 identical levels stacked on top of each other. There's deep eaves to protect from the sun and shed snow. One thing that Norm Carver did a lot was really good sighting of the house. So you've got a lot of daylight because it's built into the slope on both levels. He knew that the trees would be full canopy in summer, so that's more shade, and then more light in winter. The house is oriented south. This side is south, this is west, that's east. So always taking in these things into account. So reduction of power and electricity, to heat and all that stuff.
My name is Vanessa Hills. Tim and I moved into this house about a year ago, and we purchased it in 2022. Tim and I bought this house and it was in rough shape, so it needed a lot of work, a lot of attention. And it took a full year before we had done enough that we could move into the house. There was a lot of structural stuff that needed to be done, a lot of things just to make sure that it was, a house that we could comfortably live in. But other than that, I don't think we did a ton of anything beyond sort of restoring what, in particular, Tim had talked to Norm Carver about what this house should be like. One of the things that I love so much about this house is that it's really conducive to our lifestyles, because we're both pretty introverted people, and so we like to have our own space, and we want to feel like we're in a safe, protected home, but we also have the advantage of having all this motion, all this movement outside. So even if it's like just the leaves blowing in the wind, or having the deer run up, or we watch our cats stare out the window and argue with squirrels all the time. And so it feels like there's always action happening. There's always something going on, even if we are kind of still and reading or working. We have all this movement around us, which is a really cool way to live. A lot of people, when they come and visit us in this house, they're always just amazed. They come in and they remark about how cool it is, what an interesting house it is, how amazing it is. And then sometimes they'll ask us just how things function, and it's different from living in a traditional, like, kind of cookie cutter house. But I think that's what makes people fall in love with these kind of houses, is because you sort of fit the house, and the house, instead of the house like fitting you. And so we've kind of adjusted to living in it, and I don't think it's a sacrifice. I think it's a great way to grow into the house, so that it feels so customized to us, even though we haven't really customized the house. It's just we've grown to fit it. As the seasons change in this house, the obvious things change. The colors of the leaves change. We see every June without fail, we see, the baby deer coming out and all spotted, and we see those things cycle through. A big thing that changes is just the way the light moves around the house, how much light comes in, from what direction it's coming in, and sort of the tone of the house shifts as the season shifts. So when you have everything blanketed in snow, it feels so different than when you're covered in this greenery, and you have to really struggle to look out through all the trees and the leaves, versus when you have just these kind of bare trees and white snow, and it's so fresh and clean and different. And so each season has something special, and it almost feels like the house changes. We don't have to change the interior, but it's changing whether we do anything or not.
I know in Kalamazoo there's a strong preservation movement for historic districts, older homes. But now that mid-century modernism is reaching that maturity, it's 70 or 50 or 60 years old, it's definitely reaching people who are preservation minded. There's still a number of homes that you see get sold and then flipped and just whitewashed. And it happens everywhere. I think it maybe happens less in smaller towns, because people are not doing that as much. By talking about Norm Carver's work, people have a stronger appreciation for him, and they are less likely to remove the things that make it a special home. They buy it because it has these features, not because they want to change them.
Something that Tim and I both care a lot about is trying to reduce the idea that we have to constantly change things all the time with new stuff. So for him, a lot of it is the mid-century furniture and kind of redoing things and restoring things so that they can continue to be used for another 30, 40, 50 years. And I think we feel the same way about the houses that we live in, is what can we do to keep the houses in good condition so that not only can we enjoy them, but they should be enjoyed for many more decades, right? This house has been, just over 50 years, and there's no reason that it needs to not last another 50 plus. So it's also about the stewardship of making sure that it does. Even if we aren't here for all 50 years, we want to make sure that it's here, that it's going to be a viable place for someone to live, and that it won't be tempting for a developer, for someone else to knock it down and build something else. You know, we live in a great neighborhood. It would be easy to build something else here, and so we want to make sure that this house has enough going for it that it will continue to be here and be part of this neighborhood.
Probably something that Vanessa will say is that we love living here because of the trail that's accessible just down there, and it's very walkable all around here, and it's quiet and still very accessible. You know, it's pretty close to grocery stores, but you still feel quite, not isolated, but it's a nice, quiet place.